You are destroying yourself, America. I just made a long video about how great America is. You're destroying yourselves, and in the process, you're destroying the country, America, you live in. Now, let me tell you something. America is made up of people. And when the people start to fall, the country starts to fall. America is made up of citizens. Now, here's the three things that make America great: God, family, and work. Those were the three pillars that America was founded on over the last 250 to 300 years. Well, 250 years, but it actually started a little before then. Even the Native American Indians, before the white man came over here, was worshiping God, the High Spirit, taking care of their family, and working. The principles were the same. Why? Because the principles do not come from man, they come from God, the Bible. They come out of the Garden of Eden. That's where the principles come from. The principles come from the Bible. Worship God, take care of your family, and work. That's where the principles come from in America. And every country that abandons these three principles eventually loses their country. That's what happened to when Rome fell, Egypt. Every country in the Bible that fell, every country throughout history abandoned three things: worshiping God, taking care of your family, and going to work. So today, you don't want to follow God. You don't want to take care of your family, or you don't have a family, or you've abandoned your family, or you've had 3 or 4 families, and you've abandoned all of them. And you don't want to work. Everyone today wants $450,000 houses. You want $80,000 automobiles. You want all the toys, all the big, huge, tires that go with them. You want all the credit cards, all the appliances, all the toys outside. You want all the private schooling. You want all this stuff, but you don't want to work for it. You want to take out loans to get all this stuff. You don't want to work for the things you desire. And what's happening in America is your desires are overtaking your ability to work and keep up. You want to lay around and have the government give you the free stuff. You want to lay around and get free hospitalization. You want to lay around and go to the food bank and get free food. You want all these things given to you for free. And the reason America's having so many problems, and the reason America is in $37 trillion in debt. No one even understands what a trillion is. A trillion is, wow. You should look up the difference between, say, 100,000 and a trillion. Then you'll understand. Even if our country was $1 trillion in debt, it would be devastating and horrific. But we are $37 trillion in debt, and in 10 years, we're going to be $40 to $45 trillion in debt. And you just don't understand. The reason we're in that is because we've abandoned God and the Bible, we've abandoned family, and we've abandoned hard work. Every person I currently know and every person I've ever met in my entire life that follows God, Jesus Christ, as their Savior, out of the Bible, takes care of their family first, and is willing to work very hard, more than 40 hours a week, every single person I've ever met like that is successful. Every person I've ever met that failed abandoned either God, they abandoned their family, or they abandoned work, or they abandoned two of the three or all three. See, the homeless guy in the street corner, he's abandoned God, he's abandoned his family because he's alone on the street, and he's abandoned the principle of work very hard to receive what you want. When you abandon those one, two, or all three of those things, but you've trained yourself, you still want, you still gluttony, you still want the cheeseburger every day, but you don't want to gain weight. You want the car payments, but you don't ever want to, have any problems. You want the big house payments, but you don't ever want any problems. And you don't ever want to work over 40 hours a week. We are the only country in the history of the world where you can work 40 hours a week and your spouse can work 40 hours a week. You can have every Saturday and Sunday off, every night off, every holiday off, paid, every holiday paid, time and a half. You can have health care come right out of your check for like $30 a week for your whole family. If you belong to a union, you can make $25 an hour. You can make $1,000 a week. Now, you won't bring home $1,000, but you can make $1,000. And if your spouse is making $1,000, you bring home $100,000. You make $100,000 a year. All of that, and you can do all of that. You can buy a $300,000 house, 2 $40,000 cars, 5 credit cards, go to college, both of you. And you say, well, I can't do that on $100,000 a year. You're not doing it on $100,000 a year. You're doing it on 40 hours a week. You're only working 40 hours a week. My grandpa works 70 hours a week. My dad works 60 hours a week. When I was working as a young man, I worked 80 hours a week for 10 years of my life. I worked 80 hours a week. I know guys today, 60 years old, they're working 60 hours a week. They got so much money, they're just stocking it and piling it away. Everybody's like, well, how do I become a millionaire? How does the stock market make me a millionaire? You don't rely on investments to become a millionaire. You go out and start saving $30,000, $40,000 a year for 20 years and you're a millionaire. It's that simple. But, my grandparents never had those opportunities. My dad never had the opportunity to make that much money. My generation may or may not have had the opportunity in some areas. Your generation today has the opportunity to make $30 an hour and work 70 hours a week. That's $2,000 a week for one person. That's $100,000 a year working 70 hours a week for one person. You could do that from age 20 to 40, save 50% of your income, and you save $50,000 a year, 50% of your income for 20 years, and you have $1 million cash on you, principal in the bank. You won't even have to rely on one investment. You have saved $1 million on your own. But everyone I know who's abandoned either God, abandoned their family, or abandoned hard work Every single person I know is either struggling or into total failure. This isn't an American idea. This is out of the Bible, the book of Genesis, all the way through. The book of Ecclesiastes tells you, follow God, take care of your family, enjoy the work of your hands. Jesus talks about it all the way into the New Testament. These are the principles for success. You know, one of the ways you can tell, now I'm talking about myself here. I just lost 75 pounds. I lost 75 pounds this year. And I got lazy. When it came to food, I became lazy. And you can tell 50% of Americans are 40 pounds overweight or more in obesity. 50% of Americans. Well, what that is a lack of work, a lack of hard work. You might work at a desk. You know, people keep complaining they don't have enough money, but they only work 38 to 40 hours a week. This is America. If you want more money, you can get 2 jobs. If that's really your goal, to get more money, well, then stop complaining and go get a second job. This is America. You're allowed to work 80 hours a week. This is America. It's legal to work 80 hours a week. I don't think people understand that anymore. You're allowed to work 80 hours a week. You're allowed to eat healthy foods. You're allowed to lose weight. You're allowed to save 50% of your income. You're allowed to sacrifice and go without so you can save more money for the future. You're allowed to read the Bible to your children and your wife. You are allowed to be successful in every area of your life. But you want to know what? In the United States of America, you are also allowed to fail. You are allowed to fail, become a fallen down drug addict, alcoholic, sitting on the street corner, pooping your pants, rolling around, calling an ambulance every day. You're allowed to do that. You are allowed to fail to the extremes in America. And we got this bad left-wing thought process today that says, oh, those people can't help it. You know, if you really got down and analyzed the number of people who really can't help it and need to be in a mental institution under 24-hour-a-day care for the rest of their life, it comes down to 0.1% of all of America. So there's 350 million Americans. 1% would be 3,500,000. 1/10 of 1%. There are less than 400,000 or 500,000 people in all of America that would need that kind of assistance. Everybody else, their family takes care of them. If you're handicapped or mentally handicapped or you're sick, your family takes care of you. There's a very extreme small percentage in America that actually needs that. Do you know that less than 1% of all Americans are homeless? Less than 1%. But what do we hear all the time? We hear about the homelessness. Do you know less than 3% of all Americans are gay or homosexual? And what do we hear all the time? All about how everyone's gay and everyone's homosexual. Do you know maybe 10% of Americans are racist? And what do we hear all the time? All of America is racist. But you know 50% of Americans don't work. They don't have a job. 50%. What we never hear about that. You know, right now, today, there's 12 million available jobs in America right now, 12 million. And nobody wants the jobs. Nobody wants those jobs. They're like, I don't want a job. I'd rather just lay around and get my free government benefits. I have a different perspective on this because my great-grandpa came over from Norway in 1850 to America. My grandfather was born in 1895. My dad was born in my dad was born in the 1930s, the early 1930s. I was born in 1962. All as I've seen my whole life is how to be successful. God, family, work. You serve God, you serve your family, you serve your boss at work. You die, you go to heaven because you believed in Jesus Christ and you served God throughout your lifetime. The system is still available. The system is still there. The system, this is the day of salvation, meaning the last 2,000 years has been the day of salvation since Jesus Christ was on the cross. The system to be extremely successful is still right here in America in front of you. But nobody wants it. Everyone is abandoning God. You're abandoning your family, and you're abandoning the principles of going to work. You know, people, they complain about Elon Musk. What does Elon Musk do? He works 90 hours a week. They complain about Donald Trump. What does Donald Trump do? He works like 80 hours a week. They complain about Mark Zuckerberg. What does Mark Zuckerberg do? He works like 100 hours a week. They complain about Jeff Bezos. What does Jeff Bezos do? He works like 80 hours a week. This is how people become successful in America. But I will say, you have the right to become unsuccessful. You have the right to just sit around and not work at all and complain that you're not working. Or complain you don't have any money. Or complain you're not losing any weight. Somehow you're not magically losing weight by sitting around and eating Twinkies. This is America. You have the right to become a drug addict and nobody can stop you. You have the right to become an alcoholic. As long as you don't harm anybody else or drive a car while you're doing it, this is America. You have the right to go down and buy marijuana right now and get high for the next 5 years. As long as you don't harm anybody else or break any laws, you can be the most unsuccessful, filthy, despicable, smelly, lazy sluggard you want to be in America. But just don't be surprised when everybody doesn't show up at the street corner and throw dollar bills out the window trying to help you. In fact, there's so much help for homeless people, it's ridiculous. You walk into any church in America that'll help you. There's tens of thousands of churches that'll help any homeless person. There's thousands of food banks in America that will help a homeless person. The federal government, SNAP benefits, food benefits, by the billions to help people. And still, the problem doesn't get solved. It's not an issue of money. It's not a financial issue. It's an issue of the human heart. The human heart wants to lay around and just slobber on themselves all day. I'll end it right there. This is America. You have the right to be the most filthiest, unsuccessful person that's ever been born. But guess what? This is America. You have the right to be one of the most successful people your family has ever met, your neighbors have ever met. You have the right to be one of the most successful people that's ever lived. If you're willing to work.